Alright, hi class, good day and welcome back to our video lecture series. So previously I discussed to you about the language of poetry, and I am going to continue my discussion with that. So this lesson we will be learning about rhythm, meter and beat, which are important elements of poetry that we really have to know. So without further ado, let's take a look at first literature. Literature, definitely by definition, it is a written language, and we create literature because of language. And it is not a medium especially well suited to exploration, either at the linguistic level of phonology or in terms of its phonetic substance. So we look at literature more on the written side of language, since when we talk about literature, it's something that is written. And sound patterning plays a pivotal role in literary discourse in general, and of course in poetry in particular. So sound is also very evident in poetry, since it, especially if we go with the traditional poems, we would know that there is a pattern of sounds that is being followed by authors. So sound patterning in literature, it introduces core features, and the core features that we can explore when we speak of sound patterning in literature is first rhythm, and the second one would be meter. So these features, they have important bearing on the structure and of course the interpretation of poetry as well. Since if we are going to analyze and interpret a poem, we also will look into the pattern of sounds and of course studying its rhythm and meter. So let's try to explore further what is meter. So when we hear someone reading a poem aloud, we actually recognize quickly that that poem is being read and not another type of text. And there is a certain pattern of strong and weak syllables that we actually tend to recognize when a poem is being read. So the key to the definition is actually the proviso or the agreement that metrical patterning should be organized. So in a way that there is an alternation between um, stressed syllables or accentuated syllables and weak syllables. So there is a repetition and at the same time a specific pattern of stressed syllables and the weak syllables. Moving on, let's try to take a look at this video.
Meter in poetry, a la shmub. Alright, so if we told you to watch out for iambs, trochees, spondees, anapests, and dactyls, you might cover your head with your hands and run screaming for the nearest shelter, hoping against hope that none of them are hungry. But in fact, these fantastic five are nothing more than types of poetic feet. And those feet? Well, they help add rhythm and meter to a line of poetry. Oh yeah, it's not just jazz musicians who need to lay down a funky beat. Poetry is big on beauty and ideas and feelings, sure, but in many cases it also relies on meter to evoke a certain response from the reader. See how that rhymes?
Oh, snap!
During poetry's humble beginnings, meter was introduced not so much to make poems sing-songy, but to simply help remember the dang things.
You live briefly when make mammoth angry.
Which is easier to remember, what you need to get at a grocery store? A list like this? Or a poem like this? The milk is gone and yogurt too. I need some Dawn and a new shampoo. We're low on rye, the eggs are out. Could use some pie and sauerkraut. Catchy, no? It's It's not just because the poem rhymes, it's because there is a natural flow, a rhythm to the words. Let's take a look at a version of our shopping poem that is lacking in rhythm. The milk is gone, and somebody polished off the last of the yogurt, too. I need to get some Dawn and shampoo. We're running low on our rye. The eggs were eaten this morning, and so they're just about out. Since we don't have any dessert on hand, it would be nice to stock up on pie, and we should also probably get sauerkraut. Still rhymes, but like, yikes. Probably not something you'd see come out of a poet laureate. Meter is absent in free verse poetry, but there is still rhythm. Not every line needs to have a certain number of syllables, and you can switch up where you stress certain words. But even free verse makes you feel as if there is some kind of music infused into the language. Try playing around with meter yourself and see what happens. If all else fails, at least you won't run out of sauerkraut. Blah.
Alright, so I think it's very clear from the video on what meter in poetry is all about. So basically, when we look at the traditional poetry, we would really see their very noticeable meter and of course the rhyme as well. But if we go into poems with a free verse, then it is difficult to have this meter, because the meter, it's the pattern, the pattern of the sound that deals with the repetition of the accentuated or the stressed syllables and the weak syllables. So if you are a poet and you are very much particular with traditional poetry, then of course you have to really consider meter. And in fact, in the video, there was this example when a poem is shortened and it, of course, has the same meaning, it conveys the same meaning, but it's shortened in a way that it has a very specific meter, and compared it to a longer poetry, the same meaning, it's the longer version of that, but of course the meter is not there. Though there are still words that rhyme, but the meter could no longer be distinguished in the longer version. So that's what meter is all about. So now let's proceed to rhythm. Actually, these two are kind of inseparable. Rhythm, it's a musical quality in language, and obviously it is reproduced by repetition. So the repetition into a regular phrasing across a line of verse is what makes rhythm. It's actually a pattern movement of pulses in time, just defined both by periodicity. It occurs at regular time intervals, and the repetition, the same pulses occur again and again. So poets can create rhythm by first repeating patterns of stressed and unstressed syllables, and they could also create a rhythm through repetition of words, phrases, lines, or sentences, using rhymes or repetitions of sounds, which basically is very common, especially in traditional poetry, using pauses and varying line lengths. So these are the ways where poets could be able to create rhythm in their poetry. And there are two types of, no, wait for a moment. So actually, this is some kind of, you know, interchange the slide. So earlier we discussed on meter, and then there are two types of meter: the rising meter and the falling meter. And each type of meter actually use different type of food. Okay, so the rising meters go from, we have to start first the unstressed syllables, and then we go with the stressed ones, and they mainly use the I am and Anapest feet. While the falling meters, we start first with a stressed syllable, so it's the opposite of the rising. We start with the stressed syllables, and then we go with the unstressed ones. And the falling meters are usually found in trochee and dactyl feet. So poetry has feet. Yes, they have feet as well. So poems have feet too. So remember the two types of meter. We have the rising meter, the falling meter, and it depends on what type of food that is being used in a certain type of meter. For the rising meter, we go first to the unstressed and then two stressed ones, and mainly very common in iamb and Anapest feet, while the falling meters go first, stressed syllables, and then unstressed syllables, and of course mainly found in trochee and dactyl feet. So let's try to explore what is iambic food. So the iamb, it is actually, this is the pattern now, one unstressed syllable plus stressed syllable. It is the most common poetic food in English verse. So if you're going to take a look, that word definitely has two syllables, and the first is the unstressed, followed by a stressed syllable. So iambic food examples: behold, destroy, the sun, and watch. Okay, and watch. Behold, behold, destroy, the sun, and watch. So if you notice, hold here should receive the stressed syllable, and Troy here the same, all the way to watch, while B is the and or the unstressed syllable. So this is an example of an iamb. When we say Anapest, a unit of unstressed, and then stressed syllables is called an Anapest or Anapestic food. So it started with unstressed, another unstressed, and then stress. An Anapestic meter, that is a poem that uses a lot of Anapestic feet, is often called a galloping meter because it sounds like a horse running, like da-da-doom, 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 da-da-doom. Okay, so this is the pattern. The one in small letters here, these are the unstressed syllables. And if you notice, the Anapest started with two unstressed syllables and then followed by its stressed syllables. So da-da-doom, da-da-doom. Okay, so that is why it is considered to be like the same sound that could be produced by a horse that is running. So, Anapest, I hope you could be able to remember. You should remember the difference between these type of food, the iambic, the iamb, the Anapest, because it would be easier for you to determine the meter and the rhythmical pattern of the poem. So let us now try to work through these rather abstract definitions of, meter and rhythm using some textual examples. In metrics, the food is the basic unit of analysis, and it refers to the span of stressed and unstressed syllables. If you could remember the different types of food, we have iamb first, we have Anapest, and there are still more. And these food, they actually form a rhythm or the rhythmical pattern. So different sorts of metrical feet can be determined according to the number of and ordering of, their constituent stressed and unstressed syllables. So it is a must for us to know which syllable receives the stress and which syllable is unstressed. With that, we would be able to identify the type of food, like this one, present, right? So when we say present, it is a noun. When we say present, it becomes a verb. So it works like that. You have to determine which syllable receives the stressed and which syllable is unstressed. Okay. Now, example of an iambic foot has two syllables, of which the first is less heavily stressed than the second. So, tattoo. So this is unstressed and then stressed. And the trochaic foot, by contrast, it reverses the pattern, offering a dunda style of meter. So here we start with a stressed for the trochaic foot and then unstressed. Here is a well-known example of the first type. It's a line from Thomas Gray's Elegy, written in a country churchyard. It's very famous elegy. So this is how it is written, and if you notice, the kind of food used is an iambic, right? Da-dum, 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 da-dum. So the plowman homeward plods his weary way. Okay, the plowman homeward plods his weary way. So here, this is weak or unstressed. This is the stress. Unstressed, stress, unstressed, stress, and the pattern goes on and on. And this is an example of an iambic food. So the iambic food, again, it is unstressed and then a stressed syllable. Remember that. Now we'll proceed with the beat. So the beats within poetry represent the rhythm, the sound, the meter, and the rhyme of the entire piece of poetry. There are many different types of beats the poet can use, as well as different types of meters that they can use to write a poetry. So rhyme, rhythm, meters, and sound are all related to poetic units or poetic beats. So we do have here like the sound, and we take a look at the structure, of course, and then, or this is how it's done. The rhythm, of course, some with a wheel meter, and then the meter would consider the foot, and then this foot is the structure, and we would look into the sound, because of course the sound, it's has something to do with stress or unstressed. So this is the rhythm. And there are types of food again. Food is the basic unit of measurement of accentual syllabic meter. And a food usually contains one stressed syllable and at least one unstressed syllable. And earlier we had already kind of explored a little bit about types of food. And I believe we were able to take a look at about iam, Anapest as well. So there are still types of food that we haven't, discussed, which is Trachea, Dactyl, Sponde, and Herrick. And let's try to explore them.
A meter, spelled M-E-T-E-R in America and spelled M-E-T-R-E in the UK, is a measurement of poetry based on the structural rhythm of a verse. A meter is broken up into feet. A foot is a basic unit of measurement of a meter. It is the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables, or accented and unaccented syllables. Use whichever adjective you prefer. They are both correct. In the English language, there are 6 different types of feet we utilize: iam, anapest, trochee, dactyl, spondy, and pyrrhic. Don't let these weird names fool you. Soon enough, they will become easy to understand. First, we're going to tackle the iam and anapest. They are each considered a rise-in meter, meaning they have 1 or 2 unstressed syllables followed by a stressed one. An iam is made up of 1 unstressed syllable followed by 1 stressed syllable. The words delight, belong, perchance are all one-word examples of an iam. Now, an excerpt from Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? Specifically, this is called an iambic pentameter, which means there are 5 iams in the line. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? An anapest consists of 2 unstressed syllables followed by 1 stressed syllable. The words understand, overcome, interrupt are all one-word examples of an anapest. Here is an excerpt from "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" by Clement Clark Moore. "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." These 2 lines are written in anapestic tetrameter, which means they consist of 4 anapests per line. "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." Moving forward, we get to the trochee and dactyl. Both are considered a fallen meter. They have 1 stressed syllable followed by 1 or 2 unstressed syllables. If you notice, they are the exact opposite of an iam and anapest. A trochee contains 1 stressed syllable followed by 1 unstressed syllable. The words lover, lookin', numbers are all one-word examples of a trochee. It seems like everyone's favorite example of a trochaic meter is the opening to William Blake's poem, The Tiger. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. Each line has 7 syllables, so we're missing that last unstressed syllable at the end. Even so, this is still considered a trochaic meter. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. A dactyl is measured as being 1 stressed syllable followed by 2 unstressed syllables. The word poetry is dactyl, as are the words syllable and suddenly. I'd also like to add to the list a couple of double dactyl words, characteristically and Indianapolis. The opening to Alfred Lord Tennyson's The Charge of the Light Brigade showcases a dactyl. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward. 1 accented syllable followed by 2 unaccented syllables. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward. Next up is the spondee, which affectionately I like to say is in desperate need of a therapist. A spondee is made up of 2 stressed syllables. Get it? I said it needs a therapist because it is made up of 2 stressed syllables? Oh, you didn't come for the jokes. You came for the information. Got it. The words heartbreak, football, breakdown are examples of a one-word spondee. Both syllables are stressed. There are no poems written in 100% pure spondaic metered lines, at least none I know of that makes sense. But we're gonna use the opening line to G.K. Chesterton's poem, Lepanto, white fonts falling in the courts of the sun. The first 2 feet of the line are spondaic. The final 2 feet are anapestic. White fonts falling in the courts of the sun. Last, and well sort of least because it doesn't appear too often, is the pyrrhic. I call it the Bohemian meter. It is the counterpart of a spondee because it is a foot that consists of 2 unstressed syllables. Get it? Again? 2 unstressed syllables? Oh, come on, I'm trying here. There is no single word that I'm aware of in which can represent a pyrrhic. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments. You'll need 2 words to do so, like the combination of in a or and the. It should be noted, in modern times, most writers and scholars don't recognize the pyrrhic. They simply attach the unaccented lines to adjacent feet. In fact, there is a large contention of scholars throughout history who think it is a forced figment of our imagination. I'm still undecided on their argument, but I thought I should mention that the debate exists. Also, unlike the first 5 feet we discussed, pyrrhic has a different definition outside of the literature world. It means achieved at excessive cost, costly to the point of negating or outweighing expected benefits.
Okay, so that's the video all about, and I believe it really discussed so clearly the different types of food. Okay, so remember iambic or iamb. We have also Anapest, trochee and dactyl. We do have spondee and pyrrhic, and each of the type of food definitely is well explained, and we do have um, keys here as to the number of stressed and unstressed syllables at the same time their sequence, and that's well explained. So let's proceed. The literary device food, it is a measuring unit in poetry which is made up of stressed and unstressed syllables. So the stressed syllable is generally, it is indicated by a vertical line, whereas the unstressed syllable is represented by a cross. So the combination of feet, if we are going to combine feet, then that creates meter now in the poetry. And these meters are joined for the composition of a complete poem. And the foot is the formative unit of the meter. So the feet is necessary for us to create the meter. So in poetry, there are various types of food, each of which sounds differently. Some of the basic types of food are given below, which was already discussed. We have the iamb, tatu, the trochee, tumda. Well, this one started with a stressed syllable. Tatu, tumda. Tatu, tumda. And then spondee, combination of 2 stressed syllables. Tum tum. Anapest, combination of two unstressed and a stressed syllable, dada dum. Okay, and then dactyl, combination of stressed and two unstressed syllables, dum dada, dum dada. And then we do have even here febract, which is not included in the video earlier, but there is also a type like this, but it's not common though. It's a combination of unstressed, stress, and unstressed syllable. So the stressed syllable is in between unstressed. Da dum da. And then pyrrhic is a combination of two unstressed syllables, which scholars do not recommend actually to use pyrrhic. Tada, tada. Okay. So examples of food in literature, we do have here an example from William Shakespeare. So this is a stanza taken from William Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, and it has been composed in iambic pentameter. Actually, Shakespeare is really kind of famous on iambic pentameter, just like in the example given in the video earlier. So it's also iambic from the Romeo and Juliet. So if music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it, that surfeiting, the appetite may sicken and so die. That strain again, it had a dying fall. Oh, it came over my ear like the sweet sound. Okay, so if we are really going to follow, of course, when we read this poem, we have to make sure we stress the syllables that are written in boldface. So we do have here example number 2 from King Lear, the poem King Lear, again another piece of William Shakespeare. So this one is an example of a trochaic pentameter. So there are 5. What we do have here, stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed. Right. So this is trochaic pentameter. It has a combination of stressed and unstressed syllable pattern. So start with stress, unstress, okay, stress, unstress, stress, unstress, stress, unstress, stress. Okay, and then we have also here another example, Distraction of Sennacherib by Lord Byron. Okay, this one here is Anapestic pattern of food. And the Charge of the White Brigade, which was mentioned in the video by Alfred Lord Tennyson, is an example of dactyl. And it's pentameter because there are 5. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Right? So I believe it does not mean that the whole, because if you're going to say half a league, so it is stress and then unstress, right? Half a league, half a league. So Charge of the White Brigade, dactyl. Pattern is stress and stress, and again unstressed syllables. Next, we do have here the function of foot. The foot class provides the basic structure for the meter in a verse, and the foot also creates the musical rhythm. It's actually the reason that poetry is differentiated from prose, and without the repetition of a particular foot in a verse, poetry would be no different from prose, as the important elements of rhythm and musical quality will be missing in the absence of feet. So now we're done exploring the types of foot, meter, and rhythm, and now let's take a look at some poetic techniques. So there are poetic techniques that definitely are very significant in poetry. So first is alliteration. This alliteratory device that actually repeats the same letter or sound at the beginning of words, and these words are pretty much presented in sequence. Of course, very good example are our tongue twister. For example, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled pepper. So there is a repetition of the consonant P. So In alliteration, it is used to create rhythm and mood. It's a literary device and it repeats the same letter, but the beginning, the letter that is being repeated here, or the sound, is a consonant sound. And we find it in the beginning, or the initial. It's the first sound of the word. So allusion, it is an expression designed to call something to mind without mentioning it explicitly, an indirect or passive reference. Okay, so this video gave us a very clear difference between allusion and illusion. So types of allusion in literature: mythical, biblical, and literary. We do have for the Greek, Roman, Nordic, or other cultural folklore, we have Jupiter, Prometheus, Odysseus, Icarus. For the biblical side, we do have the Garden of Eden, mustard seed, the crucifixion of Christ, four horsemen of the apocalypse, and for the literary, poems, prose, novels, and short stories are also source of allusion. So we kind of have certain idea about a characteristic of a person. So probably in literary example would be Romeo. Okay, you are the Romeo of her life. So that's an example of allusion. And a sonnet. A sonnet is a repetition of vowel sounds in a phrase or sentence. So, of course, what we can see here are again consecutive words that are being used in a line, and there is a repetition of the vowel sounds in nearby words. So, remember, a sonnet is a repetition of a vowel sound. So, this is a repetition of identical or similar vowel sounds in a series of words, phrases, and or syllables, just like these examples. In calligram, it refers to a concrete shape poem that uses repetition of words or lines to form the shape. So, for example, this one is an example of calligram, and it's really there is a need for us to discover or take a look at um, these literary devices or poetic techniques, because they will guide us to be able to determine deviation and parallelism to be exact, in our poetry that we are going to analyze and interpret. And then conceit refers to an extended metaphor which builds on a metaphorical comparison between two things and explores its different facets throughout the poem or a section of the poem. And since it's a type of metaphor, of course, what is being changed here, what is being affected here is the meaning. So, in the positive sense, there is an extension of a metaphor, making use of poetic idiom. This had effect on the reader or viewer. So, this is, one of the things that we are going to consider. It's an extended metaphor, and we know metaphor is also commonly used in poetry. And confessional poetry is the poetry of the eye. According to the Academy of American Poets and their blog, poets.org, this style of writing emerged in the late 1950s and early 1960s, and it is associated with poets such as Robert Noel, Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, and W. D. Snodgrass. So, private experiences with and feelings about death, trauma, depression, and relationships were addressed in this type of poetry, often in an autobiographical manner. That's why it's I. It's the poetry of the I, because it's all about, it's an autobiographical kind of poetry. So it deals with the very intimate experiences of the poet's life. And we do have connotation. So connotation plus, it is the opposite of denotation, and it is when a word prompts additional illustrations beyond its simple dictionary definition. So, of course, it has a different meaning, and it could be that there could be types of connotation. It could be a negative connotation and a positive connotation. So it's beyond the dictionary definition. It is really implied though. And couplet. Couplet refers to successive pair of lines in a poem. The pair of lines that comprise a couplet generally rhyme with each other, and also they contain the same meter. So couplet poem, one of the most popular pattern poem is the couplet, and couplets have two lines that rhyme. So these are little daddy long legs playing in the sun, climbing up the front steps just for fun. And then we do have here turtle trouble. Tell me if you think you know how to make a turtle roll. It's an example of a couplet. It's composed of two lines that rhyme.
Have you ever thought about poetry being like music? Music and poetry are artistic ways of organizing sounds. The sounds of the words in a line of poetry make a rhythm that is similar to the rhythm in music, the steady heartbeat underneath the other sounds. It is called meter, the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables in a poem. A couplet has two lines that rhyme. Some poems are written entirely in couplets. Other poems have only one couplet. Couplets are frequently silly and are usually only about one subject. Here's an example of a couplet. While riding my bike, I had a wreck. I scraped my knee and hurt my neck. I told my mom and we had a talk. Next time I think that I'll just walk. What rhymes in this couplet? You are right. Wreck rhymes with neck. And talk rhymes with walk. It's all about one topic, isn't it? I think many people can relate to getting some sort of injury riding a bike. What humor do you notice in the couplet? To me, the last line injects a little humor where the author states that next time I'll just walk. He's implying that while he walks, he won't have another bicycle accident. Now let's talk about the connecting part of our activity. First, think about someone that you would like to connect with. It may be someone you miss or someone that you know would enjoy hearing from you. Second, think about what you would like to write about. It may be something in your life that has recently happened that the other person would enjoy hearing about. It may be something hard to go through, like a bike accident, or trying to understand some difficult homework. Or it may be something enjoyable, like learning to skateboard, or finally understanding division. After you decide who you are writing to and what you are writing about, you can begin working on your couplet. Remember, a couplet has two lines that rhyme. You can have just two lines that rhyme in your couplet, or you can write as many pairs of rhyming lines as it takes to tell your story. Couplets are frequently silly and are usually only about one subject.
Okay, so I believe, again, this video explains to us very well what couplet is. Just remember, the couplet, it is composed of two lines that rhyme, and it's often written about one subject. And to have the double couplet, the repetition of sounds, to create a rhyming pattern, which is AABB, and double couplets within a quatrain may be used to create a strong positive rhythm. And in poetry, a couplet is a pair of lines in a verse, and typically they rhyme and they have the same meter or rhythm, and they make up a unit or complete thought. So these are examples of couplet, and we can see here from the given examples the words that rhyme. So here, my mother thinks I am her star, except when I raid her cookie jar, right? So beware of the hippopotamus. He is trying to sit on all of us. And then I've had a dog, I've had a cat, I've got a snake inside my hat. Peter Patter goes the rain, slipping down by window pane. Okay, and we do have the dramatic monologue, which is another poetic device, and it is a poem spoken by one person to another person, and then the listener here is implied. And these poems deploy voice, the use of first person I, and obviously second person you in this poem. So dramatic monologue, it's dramatic because it is utterance, spoken word or statement of poetic character, and definitely it has the force or feeling of a drama. And here character developed through a conflict between opposite thoughts and emotions. And we do have the emotive language. Emotive language, it's obviously a way of writing where the author deliberately chooses his or her words carefully to create and evoke emotion within the reader. And it is about word choice that can actually evoke different emotions. And the author can draw the emotions from the reader, such as sadness or joy. And upon reading, the reader begins to feel or have their senses awaken as the words impact on their emotional level. So, emotive language, it's a set of words chosen by the author to evoke emotion. It could be an emotion of sadness, joy, anger, excitement, and the likes.
Hi boys and girls. I am Miss Sherry Berry, your substitute teacher. Today, we are learning to use emotive language to communicate. Before that, I need to go to the press and tell them that they have been unfair in their reporting. Let's go. Well, what happened here?
The police has just arrested the thug, who inflicted grievous pain to trusting citizens.
Thug? Inflicted grievous pain? Sounds like a brutal crime. If that's true, he should be condemned to the dungeons. Dark places make me nervous.
The offbeat humor is intellectually invigorating.
Yeah, it's funny.
Adults are complicated. Let's take a break. Let's get some coffee. I like mine heavy-bodied and balanced. Let's think about what happened earlier, as I enjoy this coffee. We met this gentleman earlier, and he said,
The police has just arrested the thug, who inflicted grievous pain to trusting citizens.
Compare that sentence to, the police has just arrested the culprit, who wounded innocent victims. The information provided in these sentences is similar, but the choice of words in the first sentence stirs our emotions a little more. Let's compare the specific words used in the two sentences. The man had said thug instead of culprit. He chose to flesh out the wrongdoer's violence. He used inflicted grievous pain instead of wounded. This amplifies the brutality of the crime. He wants us to have no sympathy for the culprit. He described the victims as trusting citizens. This does not just prove their innocence. Being trusting suggests that the culprit has taken advantage of them. We can say that the purpose of the sentence on the right is to inform, while the sentence on the left attempts to persuade the audience by using nouns, adjectives, and verbs that are loaded. The man wants us to sympathize with the victims and detest the wrongdoer. Now let's think about the other people we met. Remember this couple? Let's recall their conversation.
The offbeat humor is intellectually invigorating.
Yeah, it's funny.
The movie had affected them differently. The lady seemed impressed by how clever the humor was. The man? Not so. What was the lady's purpose for using those words? How did it make the man feel? That's something to think about on my way to meet the press. Let's just say that tomorrow's headlines will be different. If you need the earth to move, you know who to call. I think I'll get another cup of coffee. Bye.
Okay, so that is what emotive language is all about, and definitely it boils down with the author writing style or the style of the author. And when you want to evoke extreme emotions and you wanted to draw it from your readers, then of course you have to choose the appropriate words from the verbs all the way to the adjectives so that you would successfully draw such emotion. May it be emotion of happiness or joy or sadness or in pain, you know, the like. So it is up to the style of the author at the same time, his or her purpose. So we do have also enjambment, the continuation of a sentence without a pause beyond the end of a line, couplet, or stanza. So it is used to quicken pace for the reader listening or create a sense of urgency. So he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with mine. So enjambment is poem ending abruptly without a punctuation. So this is an example of enjambment. So definitely it's it violated the conventions, right? Because you do have to include here punctuation marks, but there's none. And the purpose here is to quicken pace for the reader so that you would read, fast, and you would be able to listen or create a sense of urgency. So there is, a sense of urgency because of the absence of punctuation. And epigraph, so it is a short quotation or saying at the beginning of a text. It is intended to suggest its theme. Epigraph is the use of a quotation at the beginning of a word that hints at its theme. And we have here an example of The Sun Also Rises. It is written by Hemingway, and it started with a quotation. One of them is "We're all a lost generation" as well. So these are an examples. First person point of view. You know already what is this point of view. So first person, obviously it uses I. And then we have also the free verse. It's a style of poetry that does not have a regular rhyme scheme or rhythm. Hyperbole refers to exaggerated claims or statements. When you exaggerate it and you go beyond actually the description. So it is common in humorous poetry, and it can make a poem. It can make a poem in a lighthearted way. So hyperbole, and it can be used to poke fun at someone or something. And for example, read this description of a dull town. The Slowberg. I spent a couple of weeks there one day. Some people, yes, so hyperbole. Imagery. So the use of words to create the images or picture in the reader's mind. It uses or it tickles the five senses: sight, smell, touch, hearing, and taste. Which we already discussed this as well. Imagism, it is a style of poetry which uses precise language and painting clear pictures with words. It's very similar with imagery. A poetic movement established in 1912 by American and English poets Ezra Pound, Hilda Doolittle, Richard Aldington, and F.S. Flint. So here you would be able to create pictures, clear pictures, using precise language. So example of images poetry, so which depends upon a red wheelbarrow laced with rainwater beside a white chicken. So it is very clear, right? Very clear on what is going on. Red wheelbarrow laced with rainwater beside a white chicken. So very clear picture using precise description, using precise language. And then we do have also intertextuality. So it is a way in which one media text is referred in another. And it is an interpretation of the way in which one text influences another text. So it could be a direct borrowing of a quotation or a plagiarism, or slightly more indirect, such as it could be a parody, pastiche, allusion, or translation. So it is also it also is used in poetry, and poets also do use intertextuality and metaphor, which definitely, obviously, there is a different meaning, okay, different meaning given by the author about this particular term. So it is a figure of speech in which a word or phrase is applied to an object or action to which it is not literally applicable. And usually it changes the description or meaning of that item or that term. And then meter I already discussed earlier. So it is a stressed and unstressed syllabic pattern in a verse or within the lines of a poem. And stressed syllables tend to be longer and unstressed shorter. And in simple language, meter is a poetic device that serves a linguistic sound pattern for the verses as it gives poetry a rhythmical and melodious sound. We do have mood, so it refers to inducing of or suggesting a particular feeling or state of mind. And we do have onomatopoeia. It's a word formation that is associated with the sound of something. So, for example, sound of the water, like splash. When two vehicles would, you know, hit each other, there will be a crash, right? And even like the sound of the snake, or the sound of the frog, ribbit, okay? And pantun refers to a poem which features repeating interwoven lines with a specific line structure. So actually, now you are learning some additional poetic devices. Sleep she will not linger, she turns her moon cold shoulder. With no ring on her finger, you cannot hope to hold her. So, another word for insomniacs, which features repeating interwoven lines with a specific line structure. So these are personification. So it is a literary device often used in poetry where human characteristics are applied to make inanimate things, objects, or even animals in life. So we put or we make even abstract nouns, we can turn them into something human. Punctuation. So we know these are also very important. Punctuation is the mark such as full stop, comma, and brackets used in writing to separate sentences and or elements and to clarify meaning. And somehow there are poets that do not use punctuation marks. Punctuation in poetry is similar to punctuation in prose. In many ways, punctuation serves the same purpose as bar lines in music. Without them, the words and notes flow all together. And punctuation assists in organizing the written word into discernible packages or units. And punctuation in poetry serves the same function as in prose, to encase thoughts and ideas, to aid in meaning, to avoid confusion among readers, and to signal when and where to breathe. So the absence of punctuation would definitely create a pushing effect to the readers, because if there is no punctuation, there is already a kind of sense of urgency, and that you really have to go ahead and read the next line right away. And quatrain, it's a literary device that contributes to the structure of a poem. It is a four-line stanza employing a very tight rhyme scheme. And refrain is a repeated line or lines used a cohesive device in music and poetry. In this case, single words have been carried over from one line to another to tie ideas together and underline the repeated words and note their effect of the reading. So refrain. In fact, we can see the word refrain in songs. It's a repeated line or lines used a cohesive device in music and poetry. And repetition, very, very common literary device used by authors, and basically this is one of the things that we are going to look into if we are going to analyze a poem using the foregrounding theory of Leach. So it may repeat sounds, words, or phrases, and once repetition, there is a repetition of a sound or repetition of word or phrases in a poem, then that signifies that that particular element or item in the poem is being emphasized. Okay, there is an emphasis on feeling or idea, create rhythm and familiarity, or develop a sense of urgency. And then rhyme, there are similar sounds, okay, in a way that emphasizes the repetition of sound. So end rhymes when two or more lines of poetry has the same sound, ending sounds. Internal rhyme occurs when two or more words in a single line rhyme. If two or more words in a single line rhyme, then that is internal poetry. And rhyme scheme. We can go with A, B, C, B, A, B, B, those are the rhyme scheme. So conventionally, each rhyme sound is given a successive letter of the alphabet, so that a rhyme scheme could be A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, or in rhyming couplets, we could have the A, B, B, C, C. And a rhyming pattern that is created at the end of lines of poetry, you have to take a look at. Like Mary had a little lamb, this is A, lamb. Its fleece is white as snow, B. And everywhere that Mary went, that would be C. The lamb was sure to go, that rhymes with snow, so that would be B. Okay, and then we have semiotics. Semiotics is a study of sign and symbols, and these are culturally created and interpreted, and signs can connote meanings beyond themselves and can also be read at a literal level. And let's try to take a look at more of semiotics.
Have you ever thought about why certain words mean what they do? In an age when mouse can mean a little rodent or a computer device, it's easy to question exactly what words mean and how we make sense of them. This question of meaning is at the heart of semiotics. Semiotics is the study of sign systems. It explores how words and other signs make meaning. In semiotics, a sign is anything that stands in for something other than itself. This lesson focuses primarily on linguistic signs. The word semiotics dates back to ancient Greece, but its use in modern linguistics was propelled in the 19th century with the research of Ferdinand de Saussure. Saussure was a Swiss linguist who contributed greatly to the study of semiotics, also sometimes referred to as semiology. Scholars of modern linguistics understand that words do not have innate meanings. That is, when we say the word rabbit, it is not because those sounds or letter symbols have anything to do with the qualities of a small, furry herbivore. In fact, the words, sounds, and letters are all unrelated to the creature we call rabbit, except that humans have assigned a value to them. Because people have developed the ability to assign meaning with words, we are able to describe abstract meanings. This means we have words for things that we may not be able to actually see in front of us.
So that's what semiotics is all about. It's definitely the study of signs and symbols. And we do have sensory imagery. So it's any description that involves one or more of the five senses. So it could be the sense of touch, sight, taste, smell, and hearing. And poetry that's rich in sensory detail helps the reader perfectly envision or experience the scene that the poet is describing, and the poet would want the readers to really imagine or feel that as well. Which this is already discussed earlier. So simile, you already learned it previously. It is a literary device that compares one thing, and you would always remember it uses the word like or as. So for example, I am as like or as, or I am as examples, I am as quick as a cheetah, my eyes are as blue as the ocean, and the lines. Or you can say my ears can hear like a rabbit. And we have symbolism. It's used when the poet invites the reader to see something standing for something else. Example, an object or word to represent an abstract idea.
Symbolism. Definition of symbolism. The use of an object or action with the intent of representing something beyond the object itself. First example, From the Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. The road is a symbol in this poem of one's life path. Example number 2 from Mending Wall by Robert Frost. And on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. In this poem, the wall is a symbol for separation.
Yeah, so this is clearly a very good explanation of symbolism.
Symbolism.
And then we do have the tone, the general character or attitude of a place, piece of writing, or situation. So tone is not the same as mood, and we have here a difference. A mood is how the poet makes the reader feel, and how we feel when we read poetry is often affected by the tone of the poem. So we do have here the poet, and then the tone. The mood is within the reader's mind, and no, within the reader's mind. So tone indicates the writer's mood, voice, and attitude. Often an author's tone is described by adjectives such as cynical, depressed, sympathetic, cheerful, outraged, positive, and the like. So this is it for our last video lecture for Unit 2, and these things are very important and needed when you do your analysis of the poem Me Up at Does, written by E.E. Cummings. So don't forget, class, in that activity, you have to make sure you would be able to identify which part is deviated, do it per line, and which part is express a parallel features, and you would also look into the linguistic forms or linguistic levels that they belong. Would it be lexical, morphological, and so much more. Okay, so thank you very much for listening, and I will expect your outputs. That will be on the due date that I set. So I hope you will have fun doing the analysis and interpretation. Bye everyone. Thank you so much.